Welcome back to Saving the Republic with Joe Staten, presented by Grab Your Gear Network, where we speak to people who work hard every single day. Merit shop workers, trades workers. This channel and this show is for you. We're here live on STR 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, bringing you guys the news that really matters, but the mainstream news is probably not talking about. So if you care about following what matters, make sure you give us a follow here. We also just had our full documentary go live on the channel, The Union Hustle, exposing fraud in America's unions, live on the YouTube channel at Grab Your Gear, with clips on the Instagram and TikTok, again, at Grab Your Gear. Now, today we have quite a bit of news to go over with just 8 days remaining until the most consequential election in American history, arguably. But former President Trump is taking a pretty significant lead in the betting markets, which is, I guess, up to you to determine how much weight that holds. It's the public's opinion, not necessarily polling, but the polling data is also showing a remarkable turn from the former president, with President Trump taking the lead in the Real Clear Politics national average. On top of that, we just had a breaking story that we're going to get into here in a few minutes with our guest today of Governor Tim Walz being implicated potentially with a Chinese Communist Party official's daughter. Okay, an affair surfacing just an hour ago. This broke from the Daily Mail. So we're still going to wait to see how this develops. It's not confirmed yet, but the report looks pretty interesting. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But our guest joining us today is a special one. He's not necessarily specializing in politics in the media realm, but he has a lot of experience with over 19 years as an award-winning sportscaster with ESPN. Mark Rogers, also the founder of the Voice of College Football Network, with over 25 channels and over 45,000 listeners on the main channel. So, Mark, I guess I'll open up with this question. I know you're a Christian and a patriot who loves this country, also a college football lover. So which one of those would you kind of pick as the most important?
Well, I've been around the block a few times, Joe. So I would say this, that it's become apparent to me that the longer I live, I think that for most of us humans, that when we are focused on a task and we have a business and industry that we have to do, then whatever is our sideline, our hobby, then becomes more of our passion and the thing we love and pursue because the other thing we have to do. So since I have to do the college football, then certainly the social issues, the politics, and everything being on the line that it is, that has stolen my heart in recent years more so. And then obviously, hey, let's face it, that is just a bit more important than the college football. But certainly covering college football, and I saw it most in 2020 with the riots stemming from the George Floyd issue, and then also from the COVID situation and the pandemic. The two will cross at some points, and that's when I certainly gained a lot of followers and a lot of support and a lot of loyalty, but I also faced a lot of criticism and detractors because I was very upfront about where I stood on those topics. As again, I don't think that you can really be in any industry and avoid, especially in this day and age. You could have 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, you could have hid in a corner and not needed to confront these issues. But being out in the public in any industry, the social issues and the divide in this country, and the stark contrast in what I believe is righteousness and uh, ungodliness, I don't think can be avoided.
Yeah, and college football is something that you and I both enjoy watching and taking part in, but that's something that we take for granted here in America. And politics has really been creeping in every aspect of our lives, as you said. And so, maybe a good question to throw your way is, first of all, what is your worldview? Like, what matters to you? What do you define as truth? And secondly, how do you see that manifesting in politics? Because I know, part of the reason I care so much about politics is because I see a direct tie to religion and morality. And there are truth claims being asserted by both parties right now. And in my opinion, the left is asserting a very different version of a worldview than the right is. So how do you see that manifesting, I guess, in your life, but also at the political level?
So, to me, there is an objective truth and reality in this world, in this universe, and that comes from God being the creator and all of us being created in his image, in his likeness, and therefore having an innate value that is equal, all of us equal. Now, what we do with that and the measure of respect and acceptance that we get shouldn't necessarily be the same, but we all have the same starting point. And I think that for me, that means that if there is a biblical connection, which I believe just about all of these issues have a biblical connection, then that's where I'm going. It is to um, the Bible view of this. Now we know that uh, one side of this, meaning the liberal side, uh, is and has fooled a lot of people by twisting, manipulating, taking scripture out of context on a regular basis because they assume, and they're 90 some percent of the time right, that people don't have the knowledge, nor are they diligent enough to go do the homework and go look at the text and see actually what the Bible states on certain topics that are very integral to this election in particular. We could start with abortion being number one. People don't even know what Jesus had to say about marriage, what he had to say about sin, what he had to say about heaven and hell, and what he had to say about the sanctity of life.
Yeah, and being somebody who I know you're a father and you have family values, you care about your family. A big part of this election for me personally, I'm a new father and husband, and I see the left attempting to really redefine marriage, but also really encroach on our personal lives. I don't know if you've seen this, but there was a recent experimental thing done by the Biden Harris administration in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, which is pretty close to home for me. And I think you're from Ohio as well, where when they were dealing with foster parents adopting children, if the foster parent did not affirm, quote unquote, the child's gender identity, that child could be taken from them. And there was somebody in the Biden Harris administration who said, "Yeah, this is what we want to make nationwide as far as childcare and adopting policy is that you have to affirm the gender of a child who, in my opinion, as a Bible believing Christian man who believes in objective truth like this child has no idea how to even define gender, let alone pick a gender. I have a young daughter, and if my daughter came to me and said, Dad, I feel like Batman, if I didn't tell her, no, you're not Batman, she might actually believe that, and so what do you see? There's a lot at stake in this election. Like you said, we have the border, the economy, the role of truth, misinformation, and free speech. But what do you see, as a father, how do you see this election affecting family values from the top down?
Well, I try to separate to a certain extent. It's impossible, but I attempt to separate what our uh, population as a civilization is going to look like one day in eternity when God is and has the complete say, when he has ended all of this foolishness and he has made righteousness all encompassing. So knowing that we have people who are unbelievers or who have a twisted faith and don't have a biblical perspective on things, but we all have to live together. So I, in a sense, have to separate. Okay, this is the way things should be. If we had a completely biblical view and ran our country completely on biblical principles, well, then it would be pretty harsh for a lot of individuals and their lifestyles. However, I understand and hold to our freedoms, our values of allowing people to pursue happiness in whatever way they want, as long as they are not infringing on others. Therefore, marriage, for example, if there needs to be, and obviously we've come way past this point um, in allowing same sex unions, let's say, because I don't consider those to be marriages because God defined a marriage. Government did not define marriage, but God defined marriage originally. That's fine that they can coexist and that they can live however they would like and have the same rights and privileges as I do. It's often, as you well know, uh, claimed by liberals that of various sexual orientations and so forth and transgender, that they don't have the same rights, that they are oppressed in society, and that's complete garbage. They're not. They have the same rights as all of us, and I want those rights to be protected. I want them to be able to live, even though it's not godly, it's not biblical, but in our free society, our republic, I would like to have those rights and those privileges of however they want to live, for that to be protected. However, why we have to have this lifestyle shoved down our throats with parades and festivals and flags on government buildings, on the White House itself, that has nothing to do with actually just allowing those people and that way of life to exist and be given support and be protected under law. Those are two separate paths that we've gone down.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize kind of what you're highlighting and also what I notice about the left. And it's that the worldview that's underlying this collective movement is one that places an emphasis and importance on an individual's truth, not necessarily an objective truth. And when you have that as your basis, there's a lot of things that could happen. There's really no limit to what becomes moral because guess what? We define for ourselves what's moral rather than a book. But the problem in America is that our culture from the very beginning, the founding fathers generation, almost every signer of the Declaration of Independence was a Bible believing, church attending Christian. And so their view and their version of what our society should be is a virtuous society, one that pursues truth and virtue and cultivates this within its citizens, which requires asserting certain truths in the law. We have in America, you mentioned your view is that, human beings are valuable because we're made in the image of God. That's a very simple thing and easy to overlook, but that is underlying a lot of our laws here in America. Why the question that I also like to pose to a lot of my friends on the left is why do you find a human life valuable? They march for human rights. Human rights are so important, but why is that valuable to you if you don't have the underlying truth that guess what? Every human being is made in the image of God because, a lot of those people would tell you with a straight face, Mark, yeah, I believe it's important to protect life, but if somebody in a different country does not place a value on that, aka moral relativism, it's completely fine to, for example, murder a baby if their culture finds it, acceptable. And so, I think it's important to highlight these things. But something I also notice, and I'd like to get your take on this, is just the level of cognitive dissonance occurring right now in the left. And, we hear Kamala, the sitting vice president for 3.5 years, her slogan is turn the page, a new way forward. And she's received, guess what, how many one question on this the entire campaign because she's done one interview with somebody who opposes her with Brett Baer and Fox News. But just the collective cognitive dissonance, causes me to ask the question. I'll throw this to you. You know, is the ability to see truth for what it is on the left, is that ability really being masked? Is it being weighed down and prevented by a spiritual problem? Because I know in the Word of God it says, the scales have to be removed from your eyes to even see truth for what it is. They could be told, yeah, your bank account has been hurting for 3.5 years. You're paying more taxes. You're paying more for your groceries, but the economy is doing good, and you should believe us because we're the media. So believe what we're telling you, not what you're actually living out. And they can somehow reconcile that. So the question is that a spiritual issue, or is it just a defiance, a refusal to acknowledge that their party in power has actually been a net negative on the country?
Well, we are all sinful and flawed people. And I think with that comes a high degree of pride. And we don't like to be wrong. I don't like to be wrong. Uh, and I think that has clouded a lot of people's viewpoints, that they hold so fast to their position that even when they are presented with the truth, presented with facts, presented with logic, that they are either so emotional and so tied to um, the one example that they know of, or their one experience, or the one that they've seen on social media, versus what the metrics say is the case in that particular situation or involving that issue. uh, that I just think we have so many. You've taken this. My brain's going in about 37 directions, because we all that enjoy these debates and care about our country and are wrapped up in this particular election and just politics in general, because we want to see the best decisions made. Run through all sorts of clips on social medias with the various popular, uh, for me, conservative speakers who deal with confrontations with liberals, and you hear the term "I feel this way," "I feel this." You hear that constantly out of their mouths. That whatever they feel is that's whatever they feel is, of course, tied to what they identify with, and that's their truth. And it just seems so incredibly insane for a rational, logical human being to hear that and to know that there are actual truths and standards and reality, and that we're getting to a place in this country where you have to actually argue that there is truth, that you actually have to argue that there's logic and reality, and that science does exist. Actually, science is on the conservative side in most of these issues, but it's been so twisted that that doesn't seem to be the case, but it is. So in the case of Kamala Harris, I'm trying to get back to the original question, um, and losing my train of thought on some of the. I had so many examples in my head at the time that you started to roll through all this that I've lost track of many of them. But yeah, it's a war that I wage on social media every day, and just trying to enlighten people to the reality of these situations versus what they feel. And that yeah, I do think that anyone who is voting a certain way in this election, let me say it this way, that they either genuinely hate this country, which I could not imagine making that statement 15 years ago, that there are a large portion, of course, there was always, you could go back to 1950, you could find somebody somewhere that hated the United States as a born citizen in the country. But I think that there's actually a fairly large portion of this nation that hates this country. Um, and so those are the people that are going to vote for the Democratic National Platform. Uh, I think there's also people that are, yes, they are just fooled by mainstream media. They're blinded to it, whether that's just uh, actual satanic oppression over them, is being blind to what the truth is, that they actually would like their families to be provided for and to prosper and to be protected, but they just don't see through all of this. And then there are a small handful of people that actually benefit from this in some way, whether that's financially or in regards to power that they can gain from our country continuing to go down a tailspin.
Yeah, when it comes to a spiritual question, we often see, Mark. I don't know if you've ever seen the videos from Jubilee Media. They do a really good job of highlighting kind of the divide politically. But they had Charlie Kirk go sit down with 25 liberals surrounding him, and they would come debate him. And a common theme was just this anger. There's just this high level of anger and just disgust that the left has for the right. And what I see in it as a Christian, and what our audience probably sees in it too, and they feel, is this hatred for the light. We read in the Bible, it talks about, if you're not with me, you're against me in terms of Jesus. And, God is light and in him is no darkness at all, 1 John 1:5. And so, I feel like the left sees the light. They see the truth. And what God represents is a lot of conservative values, human life being valuable, protecting life, protecting liberty, the freedom to speak, the freedom to assemble. These are values that are derivative from Christian values. And I think the left sees that in a lot of tradition and conservatism, and they hate it. And that's a spiritual thing that I see. But before we run out of time here, Isabella, if you could pull up the clip of Kamala talking about the right, I just want to touch on some of the hypocrisy going on right now within the left.
Yesterday, we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired four-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him. He wants a military who will be loyal to him personally, one that will obey his orders even when he tells them to break the law or abandon their oath to the Constitution of the United States. In just the past week, Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens. And let's be clear.
So, Mark, I'll just open it up to you for kind of your thoughts on that clip. But, something I take away from that is just the ridiculousness in asserting that the American people are stupid and not smart enough to understand what President Trump was referring to when he said the enemy from within. Speaking of people who possess an ideology, like you said, that are contrary to the very beliefs, the fundamental beliefs we have as a country, Chinese communist principles. That's what the president was referring to. But what do you see in that clip? Because I see just somebody who is extremely desperate and somebody who takes the American people as stupid.
Yeah, so first of all, we know her track record is basically she is going to say whatever she needs to say to that particular group of people. So we've seen her travel across the country and speak to people in the South, speak to people of certain ethnicities, and she changes her dialect, she changes her approach to try to fit the scene. Now she's speaking to the entire population here. And we know that they're taking one snippet of something that Donald Trump said. Okay, I will be the first one to say, to be completely as fair as possible, that Donald Trump is not as pointed and as specific and detailed with his words as I would like him to be. And he has left himself open to many of these attacks by not being as specific as he needs to be. And so, in the terms of a nationalist, this came up a few years ago. I know Candace Owens was called upon, the carpet of a legislative committee about claiming to be a nationalist, and that was just a horrible thing to say. Of course, it was taken out of context, and it's immediately related to Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler. It's a generic term. It's not derived strictly from Nazi Germany. You can be a nationalist. It just means that you simply put your country in front of other countries, that you want policy to be directed toward your country first and foremost. And there are all sorts of other nuances related to it. Okay. And obviously, we just saw Kamala Harris take one sentence from Donald Trump, and she extrapolated so much from that and stretched it into so many directions and assumptions, because the American public, in her estimation, is stupid. And so therefore she can force feed us what he meant by making one small statement about the generals that will serve under him that is not related. We've seen this over and over and over and over again, where he has said something that I've even had to look into, look at the context, look at the full, what was stated before, what was stated after, what did he mean? And every time it has been something that has been pro-American, has been constitutionally based, has been good for this country, that has been, shortened down to an 8-second soundbite that they can then, on the left, manipulate into something evil.
Yeah, that line that she took, even, and this also kind of why I brought it up, was from an Atlantic article. Jeffrey Goldberg wrote this article. The same guy who wrote the suckers and losers hoax with the military, and saying Trump's called them suckers and losers, which was debunked by over 20 people who were present that day. It's the same guy. So she's taking something from anonymous sources and implying it. And just today we saw one of her very few interviews she's done. She went on Shannon Sharp's podcast. I don't know if you saw that, Mark. And has continued to assert this idea that Donald Trump is behind Project 2025, when I don't know how many times he's disavowed that project. I mean, it's probably in the tens now, maybe 50 times he's disavowed it. and she continues to put it out. And that's just intentional dishonesty to me. That speaks of a character flaw. If you're willing to be that dishonest that many times, that blatantly, I don't know if this is somebody we want leading the country. And as you said, her principles have changed so many times. It's kind of hard to keep track of. Just today she said she's totally against anybody getting their gun confiscated, when just 5 years ago she ran on the idea of mandatory buybacks, which is a gun confiscation. She ran on the idea of decriminalizing illegal border crossings, which would effectively end the idea of illegal immigration. These are fundamental questions to America. But Isabella, if you could pull up lastly the picture of President Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden. I'm not sure if you saw this, Mark, and maybe just open this up for final comment. But we saw Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party, MSNBC, calling this a reenactment of Adolf Hitler's rally there in the 30s. And I just want to ask you, Mark, have you ever seen a Nazi rally where an Auschwitz survivor attended and a Jewish person spoke and Israel was praised? Have you ever seen a Nazi rally like that?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to quite jive together, does it? I
No.
watched this rally. I watched most of it last night. I did not see until a couple hours ago some of the backlash that was being stirred up by one or two or three, Facebook friends that I saw posting and trying to capitalize on a false narrative again that is a complete lie, that is a complete fraudulent attempt to slander uh, you know, a man who is flawed personally, but who has been the most effective president in my lifetime by far, and has, uh, pretty much had to deny what is a plush lifestyle, as he mentioned a few times last night, in order to, as he stated, you can go back to the 1980s, that he never wanted to run for president, wouldn't run for president unless it got to the point where there were no other viable options to protect us from the world in regards to our economic um, prosperity and also militarily. And that's what he's done. And he delivered for 4 years. And I would say to anybody out there, and there's probably few that are on the fence or are in the Kamala Harris camp, uh, it's just amazing to me that he was the so many of the things that he's being accused of, and that they are projecting forward that he will make this all about him and his dictatorship over the next 4 years. This man was the president for 4 years, lest we forget that.
Yeah, he's also being accused of he's going to go after his political opponents when he literally has been indicted how many times? I mean, he's been everything the left is saying that he's going to do, they are doing themselves. And as you said, we have proof that this man has been the president already. We don't have to guess. We've had 4 years of a Trump presidency, and these things are just not a threat. So, yeah, I think again we have to. The point of this show is to educate our viewers and to educate those in the trades and merit shop workers to get out and vote, because guys, this is going to affect your lifestyle. As the things I brought up today are things that can directly affect you. Is your community going to be safe? Is your community going to be the next Springfield, Ohio? Is your community going to be protected from these policies that will take your children from you if you don't subject to their, delusion and gender identity? And we've seen things, Bill Gates just came out the other day. Say what you want about Bill Gates. There's a lot of conspiracies about him, but he's openly saying if there's any misinformation, quote, on the internet that causes one person to be hesitant to take a vaccine, that's enough reason to take that information off the internet. And so, and Kamala Harris is very cozy with Bill Gates. She's very cozy with these ideas. England locking up a woman for tweeting something for 3 years. She's in jail for 3 years for tweeting. And these are the things that could affect your life. And so, this is why I wanted to have you on today, Mark, was to talk about some of these the deeper issues going on, but also just to tell our viewers to get out and vote. So, and any closing remarks for today's show and for our viewers, Mark?
Yeah, I know that Donald Trump rubs certain people the wrong way, and I am just alarmed at how many people he apparently rubs the wrong way just from a personality standpoint, who otherwise profess to be Christians, profess to be conservative based, and even if they're not filling those two check boxes, want a good life for themselves and for their family, and want a protected border, and want just, basic principles within this country and the Constitution to be served. People, wake up, look past your temperament of his personality, which I got to say, on some days I enjoy it, some days I don't. But man, I have grown to admire this man and the fight and the pride that he has in this country to go through all that he's endured for those 4 years and beyond. Who knows what he could have accomplished for 4 years if there would have been cooperation in Congress. Uh, but look past that. We are not electing a pastor or a priest or your best friend. I don't know how many people I've seen on the left talk about Kamala and, oh, she's just cool and she would just be so fun to hang out with. While I don't agree with that, so be it. Well, if that's your thought and your feeling, so be it. That is still not a justifiable reason to vote for a particular person for president, or their color, or their gender.
You're telling me you wouldn't want to go hang out with Kamala, Mark, and just have a good time and watch some
I,
college football?
wouldn't that be? I would jump at the chance. Believe me, I would jump at the chance just to have a conversation with her. Yes, I would. Now, would I enjoy it? That's another question.
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of reminds me. I don't know if you watched the vice presidential debate, but it looked like JD kind of won over a new voter with Tim Walz by the end. Once you get past all of the propaganda and the talking points about the Trump ticket, this is a ticket that appeals to so many people. Like you said, if you look past Donald Trump, what do you have? You have JD Vance, you have Bobby Kennedy Jr. with the health advocacy that would improve the lives of so many people. Even the left acknowledged when he was running for president, these are great ideas. The idea of providing organic foods to Americans and taking some of the money. If we took a fraction of the billions of dollars spent in Ukraine, for example, and spent it on improving the health of our citizens, which is exactly what Bobby Kennedy is going to do, and what Trump said, I will empower him to do this. There are so many different things to vote for this election, but the message is to get out and vote. We have to vote. We can't sit here and talk about it and tweet about it and debate. We have to vote. And the statistics are looking promising. Early vote is looking great for Republicans, but we got to get out and vote. So, really been a pleasure speaking with you today, Mark. If people want to find you, again, they can follow you at the Voice of College Football, all the surrogate channels. Mark has great content out there, especially the main channel, though, breaking down, especially what I love, Big Ten football, but really nationwide college football coverage. So, really appreciate you joining the show today, Mark.
Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've enjoyed it, but more than that, keep up the good work, keep up the fight, and I appreciate you.
Thanks. Well, thank you for tuning into the show today. Again, make sure you follow our YouTube page at Grab Your Gear. Check out our full documentary that just went live, The Union Hustle. We have clips up almost every day on our TikTok and Instagram at Grab Your Gear. And with that being said, we will see you in the next episode of the show on Wednesday. Take care.